Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. It was a clear, sunny day. Betty was running home after her shift, and when she saw an ice cream stand, she couldn't resist buying herself a large vanilla cone. She sat down on a bench in the park and enjoyed savoring the cool treat melting in her mouth. Nearby, kids were playing in the sandbox. Two twin boys fought fiercely, taking each other's toy car away from them. Betty grinned bitterly as she watched this turmoil, and an image of her own childhood flashed before her eyes. "Betty, give me the doll. I'm going to take it anyway because I'm older than you, understand? And you're a baby," shouted her older sister Victoria and rubbed Betty's braids. She fought back furiously and cried, holding her doll Kira like it was her most precious treasure. "No way! My father brought it to me from a business trip for my birthday. Leave me alone. I'll tell him everything. He'll kick your ass." That was the way Betty spent her whole childhood, fighting with her older sister. Victoria was only 2 years older, but for some reason, her mother always liked her better, and her father adored her. Her sister grew up bullious and wanted to hurt the younger sister, easily took away her candy and clothes, especially since the girls were very similar in appearance and height. They were both tall, with long, blonde braids. Betty was kinder and weaker than her sister, and almost always inferior to her in everything. But with that doll Kira, she showed unprecedented tenacity and fought desperately with Victoria, not wanting to give her father's gift. The thing is that the doll was not simple, but talking. When you press on the back, the doll sang some Chinese or Japanese wonderful song. And though its meaning was unclear to Betty, the tune was simply mesmerizing. Her father had brought it specially from a business trip abroad as a gift for his daughter. Betty's joy was boundless. That is why the girl never parted with it, even in school with her in the bag and slept with her. Her father was the breadwinner in their family. He was a sailor and went on foreign trips for many months. Then he brought a lot of presents for his daughters and wife, and a very decent salary at the time. So my mother never worked, taking care of the house and children. Alice liked such a life. She loved her eldest daughter Victoria, and amused herself with the thought that she would soon grow up, go to kindergarten, and she will have a lot of free time. But the woman did not plan for a second child, and did not want to tie her hands again. Everything happened by chance when Wayne returned from another flight. But her husband insisted the child to be. He just dreamed of a son. But when a girl was born again, he wasn't the least bit upset, and he loved Batika with a special, reverent love. Since Papa was often absent and only home for visits, it was not easy for Betty. Victoria was unbearable at times, tattling and calling names, and there was no one to complain. Mom was always on her older sister's side. The girls were also very different in character. Victoria was much like her mother, loved to dress up, had a sharp tongue, and believed that money decides everything in life. She didn't like school, didn't want to, and thought her sister was a nerd because she was always reading something. Betty, on the other hand, was quiet, read a lot, and liked to dream. When the youngest was 13 years old and their family happened irreparable, terrible tragedy. The fishing boat on which her father worked was caught in a storm and sank, and her father was gone. There were tears, sadness, and grief. Betty cried them all out, her childish mind simply refusing to accept the fact that Daddy was gone. She kept thinking that today the door would open and Daddy would shout joyfully from the doorway, "Here I am. Did you miss my girls?" And she would hug him so tightly and hear his heart beating. But the days and months stretched on, and Daddy was still gone. From that moment on, their family was gone. Everything began to fall apart before my eyes, like a house of cards. Mom first tried to find a job, but she had no experience, no seniority, and she was not used to hard work. The woman was angry at the whole world. She did not have enough money for anything. often began to get mad at her daughters, considering them now her burden. For some reason, it was especially bad for Betty. Her mother exploited her mercilessly, throwing almost all the household chores on the girl. Victoria, on the other hand, was more cunning. She could get out of the house chores, and she began hanging out with teenagers late into the night. Mom also decided to make a life for herself, and soon brought that nasty fat Uncle Serioja into the house. The woman did not even ask her daughters whether they wanted to live with him or not, but simply and unequivocally said, "Victoria, Betty, I'd like you to meet him. This is Archie. It's Uncle Archie. He's going to live with us from now on. Somebody's got to raise you and feed you, haven't they?" That grouchy, pompous turkey Betty didn't like at first sight. He gave her and her sister an unkind look and muttered something like, "How do you do?" The rest was a nightmare. My stepfather had a good job and made good money, but at home he was a real tyrant. All the housemates had to serve him and please him, especially when he was drunk, and that happened quite often after work. There was no life for anyone then. Just like in the army, you'd hear, "Alice, why isn't the soup hot enough? Betty, get the diary. I'm going to check the grades. Victoria, make me some tea. Get a move on. Do I feed and drink you all here for nothing?" Mom, despite her stepfather's constant nagging and taunting, pleased him in every way for the sake of money. Victoria adapted quickly too, smiling sweetly at the hog and winking and ingratiating herself with him in every way she could. Betty, on the other hand, didn't know how to do it and didn't want to. Her whole nature rebelled and rejected this boorish soldier. The girl looked at him furtively and tried to be less in his eyes, and her stepfather took all his discontent and bad temper out on her. Their dislike was mutual. With each passing day, life in the family was becoming more and more unbearable. The girl often cried, twitching at every rustle, and withdrew she tried to stay longer in school, and withdrew she tried to stay longer in school, and did not go home, not to hear the reproaches and scolding in his address. But that didn't help either. Her stepfather waited for her on purpose, getting more and more drunk. And as soon as Betty came home, it was the same thing. "Where have you been? It's after 6 o'clock. And who's going to help your mother? The dishes are not washed. Clean the room and bring the diary here. I'll check for what beautiful eyes they put you at. You're such a straight, a student." He gave his stepdaughter a smack in the face and happily went to his bedroom. The mother pretended not to hear anything, and his sister at the door chuckled venomously. She didn't get any of that, though she often went out late and even tried smoking. And a weeping Betty walked dejectedly to wash the dishes for everyone. Her sister was hanging around, chuckling and trying to teach her little sister about life. "You're a fool, Betty. Why are you looking at him like a little wolf? It's obvious that you despise him, and that only makes him madder. Smile on the contrary, tell him his shirt is nice today and it suits him very well, or something else, like he's like a father, a provider, or even better. Be more cunning. I called him Daddy yesterday, and he even gave me some pocket money. Otherwise, you'll still be walking around with a bat." Betty was indignant. "What kind of a father is he to me? If our daddy were alive, that scoundrel wouldn't even be here. I'll never call him Daddy, you know that. He doesn't love us, he's just pushing us around and making fun of us. Why did Mama bring him here? Why does she put up with all this and keep quiet? Doesn't she care about us at all?" Victoria was fiercely defending her mother. "You don't understand much. He provides for us, feed and clothe. My father is dead, and where does my mother get the money? She can't really go out to mop floors. And money solves everything now. And you bear it. Come on, you're so small-minded. You don't know anything about life." One day, the gym teacher, Steve, was surprised to see Betty frantically pushing her abs in the mats in the gymnasium when there were hardly any students left in the school. He approached her quietly and asked, "Betty, why aren't you going home? It's late. Or did you decide to break all the sports records? That's nice, but don't overtrain yourself. It's all good in moderation." The girl was all red and sweat was streaming down her temples. "I don't want to go home. I hate everybody," and continued rocking her abs, counting aloud 53, 54. The experienced teacher realized it was bad. The child was on the verge. He sat down next to her on the mat and said as gently as possible, "Bethy, stop. Look, whatever happens, know that everything can be fixed. Everything can be changed. You can trust me. Tell me what's the matter. I can tell you're not feeling well. Did someone hurt you a lot? A conflict with your classmates? Or problems at home? Did you get mixed up with a bad company? But that doesn't sound like you." The girl looked into the teacher's eyes and suddenly burst into tears and began to scream so that the veins swelled up on her neck and pounded her fists on the mat. "Nothing can be done. My stepfather hates me. He's mean. He's always picking on me and yelling and slapping me around, and my mom and sister laugh and laugh. I hate them all, and I don't want to go home. I don't want to live either. It's the same thing every day. All I hear is that I'm trash." Steve gave Bitipo a fatherly hug and began to comfort him. "God, silly girl, you've got something to be sad about. You've got graduation coming up. If life at home is unbearable and spit on everyone, go to the capital. You'll get a place to live, get a job. You're a serious girl with a head. You won't get lost there. And let them all live as they want. God be their judge." Betty suddenly stopped crying and said quietly, "Thank you, Steve, for the advice. I hadn't really thought about it. But where am I going to get the money to live in the capital? My mother would not give me a penny, my stepfather even less." The teacher thought about it, then said, "Don't worry. I'll think of something. I have an aunt who lives there. She is old, a pensioner, very kind. I'll call her and make arrangements for you to stay with her for a couple of months. I'll tell her you're a distant relative of my wife. And then you can get a job and get a room. You can't stand being picked on and let people walk all over you. You know that, Betty. Change your life and don't be afraid of anything. And don't have any bad thoughts in your head. Understand? That's it, march on home." Betty glowed and began to thank her beloved teacher. "Thank you, Steve. You're the best." The teacher waved her hand and sighed heavily, thinking to himself, "Poor girl. What a clever girl, an excellent student. What can you scold her for? I do not understand these miserable parents. If only I had children." God never gave him and his wife any children. So the teacher tried to always treat his students as his own, tried to understand their problems, tried to help them. A month later, graduation was over, and the next day Betty began to pack for the road. There was a deafening scandal at home. Her mother screamed and yelled at the house, "Where do you think you're going? I don't understand it. Can you hear me? Hey, who am I talking to here? Answer me right now." Betty answered quietly, all inside, shrinking. "I'm going away to the capital for good. I'm going to find a job there. I'm going to start a new life. The train is in 2 hours." Alice looked at her daughter in a daze. "You're what, stupid? Eat henna? What the hell are you going to conquer the capital? On mine or what? You know I won't give a penny for your dope. She's got it in her head to run away from home. Akshi, you tell her. Look what she's doing." But the stepfather was of a different opinion. His youngest stepdaughter, especially infuriated always, and was only glad to himself that one less mouth to spitite, and so calmly replied, "Let her go wherever she wants. It's her right. She's already 18. If she's so brave, I'll even give her money for the trip. She's useless anyway. All she does is whine and snivel." Victoria just giggled. "You're such a fool, Betty. Do you think there's a prince on a white horse waiting for you? You'll be crying yourself to sleep. Stay home, you're better off otherwise. Look, I'll have your sofa to myself in no time. Now I'll sleep there myself. And you can't take all your clothes with you." But Betty only stubbornly shook her head, stuffed her favorite doll Kira into the suitcase, grudgingly hugged her sister and mother goodbye, sat down for the road, and went to the station alone. Her relatives did not rush to see her off, but only twirled at her temple and slammed the door. Into the new, frightening, and unknown life, Betty was escorted by Steve. He made arrangements with the aunt, as promised, and gave the girl an address and phone number, and his own too, just in case, and also slipped her some money and a bag of pies. "That's it, Betty." "Bye, Betty." "Here, take these. You can eat on the way. My wife baked them. They're still hot. You'll do fine, don't doubt it. And your relatives will bite their elbows. You'll see." The girl hugged her beloved teacher, once again thanked him, and got into the carriage. She thanked her again and got on the train. She felt uneasy at heart. How would everything turn out? What awaited her? But warmed by the thought that at least there was a place to live for the first time, one thing she knew for sure, she wasn't going back home. After her daddy's death, it had become unbearable to live there. Even Victoria had changed beyond recognition, if only for the decency to be upset that her own sister was going away forever. It was as if they were saying goodbye to an annoying lodger, not their own daughter. Maria welcomed Beatira cordially. She had been fussing all day, getting ready, though she was already a grandmother in years. But the request of her favorite nephew could not help but fulfill. If he asks to shelter a good man, it means it is necessary to help. Anything can happen in life. Her apartment was small, one room, but cozy. The pensioner fed the girl from the road, gave her a bed on the cot, and they began talking. They quickly found a common language and became friends. Maria gave the new tenant valuable advice. Don't try to trade. You're young, inexperienced. We'll hang all the shortfall on you. And don't trust any modeling agencies. They love to lure pretty young girls to them. There's nothing but deceit there. My advice, go to a cafe, you'll be fed and have money. You won't get lost there. 2 weeks later, Betty got a job as a waitress in a cafe, and she was happy. She took up her work with a great zeal. She quickly mastered her new profession, and things went well. And 6 months later, Betty met her first love. Max was a builder, and he was sent to do some repair work in the cafe. That's how they met. The guy was from a dysfunctional family, lived in a small room in the suburbs. He fell in love with Baptiste at first sight. A tall, slender beauty with long braided hair captivated his heart. Best of all, she was not as self-serving as the other girls. For Betty, money wasn't important. What was important to her was a sincere, kind attitude, respect, real feelings. The young people began dating, and soon Betty moved in with Maxim in a rented room to live. It was uncomfortable to continue to embarrass the old woman. Their relationship was stormy. They fought and made up. Max was insanely jealous of Betty for visitors, running to meet her from the shift, seeing her home. But they still loved each other deeply, to the point of madness. And they dreamed of a wedding, however modest. Money was tight, so Max got a job as a high-rise worker, where they paid a lot more, even though it was a very risky job. But Max loved risk. It was as if he always walked on the edge. And Betty, on the contrary, was very worried about her beloved, and they often quarreled about it. Maxime, well, it's very dangerous. Do you have at least a reliable insurance? What a height. I die of fright. Well, this money, find something calmer. But the groom with heat parried. Honey, I'm trying for us. Here's the money we'll save. We'll celebrate the wedding. Maybe we can get an apartment on mortgage. And then the kids will come. I was so sick and tired of this one. Meter by one, meter room and drunken neighbors. I can't take it anymore. But it did not go according to plan, but rather all went upside down. Within a month, Betty realized she was pregnant. The girl decided to double-check everything and bought a test, and then stumbled for a long time, looking at the bright 2 stripes that showed up on it. She was gripped by mixed feelings. On the one hand, she was only 18. It seemed early. She did not have her own place. She had not yet stood on her own feet. But on the other hand, it was his and Maxime's baby inside her. A new life was being born in her. That thought alone made her want to smile all the time. There was also the worry of how her fiancé would feel about the news. They were planning children in the future, of course, but not right now, right? What if he would get mad? She immediately told Maxim. He was jumping and rejoicing like a child. He wanted a baby. He kissed and hugged Betty. He kissed and hugged Batia, spinning her around the room. It seemed to the girl that this was her happiness as a woman. Her heart was relieved, and her mind was at peace. She loved and was loved. Soon their child would be born, and they would live happily ever after. Betty was overjoyed, and even called her mother to tell her the news. "Mom, can you believe I'm pregnant? You're going to be a grandma soon. Maxim and I got married in a registry office. It all happened so unexpectedly. I'm shocked myself. Are you happy for me?" But Alice immediately put her daughter down. "I do not understand what your stupid idiot happy. Found some poor builder, squat in a room meter by meter, and you're pregnant. What a joy. Do you have any idea how much trouble and money it takes to have a baby? You're still so young. You haven't seen life, and you're already dipping into diapers. What's your hurry? You should look up to your older sister. Victoria's got a rich man, and she's spinning him around as she likes. She doesn't have to work. He gives her money anyway." Oh dear. Betty's mood was gone in a jiffy. How could it be? Instead of support again, one reproach. Nothing changes. And she answered quietly, "That's all right, Mom. Thanks for support. Goodbye." And she hung up. And then she wept bitterly. She was so hurt that her mother did not love her at all. And Victoria, too, did not call once, did not come to visit, did not ask how you were. And how many times she called her. No one cares. That day, everything went wrong from the very morning. Betty felt sick. No mood, no strength to go to work at all. And suddenly, out of the blue, the big wall mirror collapsed and shattered to pieces. Bad omen, thought Betty, picking up the pieces. She took longer than usual to see Maxime off to work, and for some reason intuitively hugged him tight and said, "Beloved, take care of yourself. Please be careful. I love you so much. And that mirror, no matter what happens." Something worries me. Max smiled carefree and kissed his bride. "Well, honey, don't get yourself all worked up in the morning. Everything will be fine. It's on you, so the pregnancy affects Memnon you she become. See you tonight, I run." This was their last meeting. Max Stack didn't show up that evening. Betty sobbed all night, tearing up the phone, calling morgues and hospitals. Finally, she received a call from Maxon's work and was told the terrible news. Her fiancé had died, fallen from a height, instant death. She was given a long explanation that it was his own fault. He ignored safety regulations. She felt sympathy, but she felt as if she had not heard anything. Everything was a fog. What happened next, Betty remembered very poorly. She was running around dealing with the funeral and the wake, and when it was over, she came home and it hit her. She suddenly realized that Maxine would never walk through that door again, never say to her, "Hello, my little bunny," or give her a gentle hug or a cuddle. And the baby, who will he call Daddy? How will she ever live without Maxine? What's she doing all this for? What sins is God punishing her for? What had she done wrong? Betty was howling and screaming, pounding the dishes and beating hysterically, so that the neighbors came running, and they called an ambulance, because Betty suddenly grabbed her stomach, fell to the floor, lost consciousness from shock, and lay in a pool of blood. As if through a thick, viscous fog, fragments of words could be heard. "Tatiana! Betty, wake up. Open your eyes. Can you hear me? Bethy?" She opened her eyes with great difficulty, and the harsh, bright light stabbed them painfully. The woman didn't understand, so she looked around. Where is she? What was wrong with her? The hospital, the ward. Some gray-haired doctor in a cap. Why am I here? What is the date today? What's going on? Mommy, I remembered Maxime, and she wept softly and bitterly. The doctor sat down next to her on a chair. Tatiana, unfortunately, I have more bad news for you. After the shock, you had a miscarriage and you lost your baby. We couldn't help you. It was too late. You were brought in with severe bleeding. We could barely save you. You didn't regain consciousness for 2 days. You scared us completely. This is the first time I've seen this in my practice, to be honest. But don't despair. We'll treat you for a couple of weeks. Remove the inflammation and give you a sedative. And then we'll discharge you. You just need to get your head back on straight for a while. Hang in there. Get better. Betty said nothing, silently turned to the wall and burst into tears. Her hands were empty, and she did not want to live. And for whom and what to live now? Her baby was gone. Maxie had taken him with him to heaven, leaving her all alone in this world. How terrible it is when you are alone. No one needs you, like a grain of sand in a stormy ocean. Her mother, upon learning of what had happened, surprisingly came to check on Bativ in the hospital. She started babbling on, comforting her. Oh, don't worry about it, Betty. I understand the grief is terrible. Not everyone can survive it. It's no joke losing your fiancé and your child all at once. Please come home. What are you going to do all alone in this capital? Archie and I would be very happy to have you. And Victoria's not here. She's off to the spa with another fiancé. The mention of Batidaj's stepfather made me shudder. He'd been mean to her before, and now he was going to make fun of her for being a loser. The girl replied quietly, "What are you talking about? Let's be honest, Mom. Your Uncle Artie hated me all my childhood, and you tell me we are very happy. I'm not a little kid to believe that. No, Mom, I'm not going back. Please go to my house and get my papers and some of my things. I'll write down the address and where to look. Here are the keys." Alice brought her daughter's things and drove home, secretly glad that Betty's pregnancy was off. She had no intention at all of dragging her grandson and fiddling with diapers. She didn't need all that trouble, and so it resolved itself. But the fact that her daughter refused to come back made her very upset. After all, Archie had recently been fired for systematic drunkenness from his position, and now they clearly lacked money for the wide life. Alice realized that Betty was as hard-working as a bee and counted on her to find work at home, too, and to support them all. But it didn't work out. 2 weeks later, Betty was signed out. When she arrived in her room, the first thing she wanted to do was to hug her doll Kira, to tell her everything, to cry to her. This always calmed her in critical moments. But she was not there. The girls searched everywhere. The toy was nowhere to be found. Could it be? Could it be that her mother had taken it? But why? Unless it was Victoria's request? To spite her? To make fun of her? She couldn't take it when she was a child, so she's making up for it now. My God, what kind of people are they? They took away the only thing that was dear to her heart, and Betty wept bitterly in hopelessness and sadness. Once again, her favorite teacher, Steve, helped her with kind advice. Upon learning of the tragedy of his student, he called the girl and had a long talk with her, listened carefully to everything, and said a decisive phrase. "You know what, Betty? You know, Betty, you can't change what happened. You can't undo what happened. You have my sincere human sympathy. Don't get sour, but start your life all over again, with a clean slate. What are your years? You're only 20 years old. You're an excellent student, smart girl. You couldn't build a family, so you didn't start from the wrong place. Try it all over again. Go to university. The entrance exams are coming up in a month. What if you get lucky? You'll get a good education, get a decent job. With your brains, you can't spend the rest of your life in cafes and carrying trays. In the meantime, the pain of your loss will wear off and your life will get better. Time heals, I know it does. Go on, Betty. I still believe in you. Once again, Betty sincerely thanked her teacher for her concern and advice, and thought about it. Why didn't she ever try for admission? She listened to the words of the teacher, and without much hope submitted documents to 3 universities, passed her exams, and still got into one of them on a budget. A new, unknown to her, student life began. She was still working night shifts and weekends in a cafe and studying at the same time. It was mentally and physically hard. She was exhausted, but she had no time to mope and sob. She became a group leader, and she graduated with honors. When our heroine received the coveted diploma, the first thing she did was call Steve, not her own mother or sister, and she almost shouted into the phone, "Steve, honey, congratulate me. I got a diploma. It was with your light hand that I got it all." "Thank you," the wise teacher replied. "That's a clever girl. I'm happy for you. But I had nothing to do with it. You were able to stand up on your own to achieve everything. Way to go, Betty. I'm proud of you. Believe me, you'll be all right. We'll have another wedding to celebrate. In the meantime, just stick to the plan. Get a job." All this time, Betty had never thought about her personal life. She longed for Maxim. Although many classmates pining for a pretty girl, but Betty, after all this experience, they just seemed silly, empty boys. She was like their senior by a lifetime. After graduation, she managed to get a job at a small firm as an economist. Pretty quickly, Betty got the hang of it. The work routine flowed. The girl often stayed after work, took reports home, and she was soon respected even by the old-timers. It was rare to find such a serious and responsible young woman these days. Their firm was overseen by a large corporation, and one day its owner, Wayne, came personally with an audit. He was given Tatiana to help him. Introduced as a responsible and valuable employee, the girl was at first alarmed when she saw this chic, respectable millionaire dressed to perfection, especially since he was looking at her so shrewdly, practically without taking his eyes off her. When the businessman saw this beautiful girl with huge, sad eyes, he fell in love with her immediately. And after working with her, the man realized that she is also a smart girl. What little, he began to show signs of attention, to give posh bouquets. Wayne for a long time could not arrange his personal life. Money was pecking away, ladies of all stripes were hanging on his neck, but at most in a month. The businessman was bored to a toothache with another beautiful good for nothing, endlessly chattering about boutiques and clothes, and not read a single book in his life. But Betty was very different, as if she were not from this era. She loved Yesenin, and Bloch was an excellent bookkeeper, easily multiplied in her head, was wise and calm beyond her years, and was completely at peace with the fact that Wayne was a millionaire. On the contrary, she shunned him and made no attempt to offer herself. Betty was very afraid to start a relationship at first. She thought she was betraying Maxim's memory. But Wayne was so delicate, gentle, cautious that somehow, imperceptibly, he managed to win Tatiana's attention and love bit by bit. The man was discovering for her a completely different world, a new capital, completely unknown to her before. They went to exhibitions in art galleries, to museums, walked around the square, and admired the beauty of the old streets. Tatiana listened attentively to the fascinating history of the capital, and Wayne was a wonderful companion, as trustworthy and calm as a stone wall. He taught Betty everything: how to dress tastefully, be social, eat oysters and lobsters, be a lady. 7 years passed, and Betty literally blossomed. She now bore Wayne's last name, worked for her husband's corporation, and lived in a huge country mansion. There was nothing about the stylishly dressed, beautiful woman who confidently clicked her heels on the parquet floor that reminded her of a waitress. During this time, Betty's mother had died after another drink, and her stepfather had refused even to bury her, had spared her money, and Wayne had taken care of the funeral, without a word of reproach. Betty had a strange feeling at the funeral. She looked at this woman, not yet old, lying in her coffin, who had borne her, and wondered, did her mother love her even a little? Why had she always been so dry and callous to Betty? Why had she traded her daughters for some roommate, bearing all of his taunts? Never once was she sincerely pleased with her daughter's successes. No praise, no support. The answers to all these questions she, alas, did not find. But, be that as it may, her mother was a mother. She had given her life, and Betty loved her all the same in her own way, and mourned her, and could not help giving her a dignified last farewell. The stepfather, on the other hand, was a drunken and deranged man, and windy Victoria was lost somewhere in a vast country, changing boyfriends one after another. Sisters completely lost touch with each other. The current life of our heroine was like a fairy tale. The only thing that upset Betty: she could not get pregnant. The miscarriage must have taken its toll. Wayne spared no expense on tests. Betty visited the best luminaries of medicine, tried a bunch of newfangled schemes of treatment, went to resorts, and all to no avail. The long-awaited pregnancy never came. Wayne never reproached her for it. On the contrary, he always consoled her. "Don't be sad, my little bird. The child is a gift from God. He will come to our family, all in due time. But even if it doesn't happen, I will always love you and will never betray you. You are the dearest thing I have, you know that." Betty snuggled gratefully against her husband. She was incredibly lucky to have Wayne. Still, how desperately she wanted to be a mommy. When she saw women carrying a baby stroller or leading a baby stroller or leading a baby stroller or leading a baby by the hand, her heart ached and clenched, wondering if she wasn't destined to experience that. She and Wayne even got a funny little dog. Cocky, but it wasn't all that. One day, Betty ran out of work on her break for coffee. There was a great coffee shop nearby. She was just crossing the road at the intersection when she saw a strange picture. A grimy 7-year-old girl was running right under the wheels of cars at a red light. She was clutching a doll. Realizing that now will happen irreparable tragedy, Betty literally dove under the wheels of a moving truck and managed to pull the child away. After catching her breath and recovering from the shock, Betty asked the frightened little girl, "Why are you walking alone? Where are your parents? Is it allowed to cross the road at a red light? You could have been killed?" The little girl replied, "My name is Maddie. I have no parents. I'm an orphan. I ran away the day before yesterday. It's bad there. The older girls beat me and make me serve them. And I don't want to." And the child suddenly cried, so sincerely and bitterly. Betty pressed her to herself in an outburst of pity and suddenly pressed the doll accidentally. She heard the very same Japanese songs from her childhood. Betty dazedly unfolded the toy to her and just stunned. It was her Kira, the same one she hadn't parted with since childhood. There could be no mistake. Betty, with tears in her eyes, asked the girl, "Maddie, where did you get that doll? Tell me, it's very important for me to know." The girl said, "When I was dropped off at the orphanage as a little girl, this doll was with me. I never give it to anyone, but it's already old and dirty. No one will take it away. Do you like her too? I call her Lyria." Betty sobbed. "No, her name is Kira. It's my doll from my childhood. My daddy brought her back from a business trip a long time ago. You know what, Maddie? Let's go to my house. My name is Betty and my husband's name is Wayne. We have a dog, Cocky. You'll like her. You can stay with us for a while, and then we'll figure something out." The girl happily agreed. "Let's go. I like dogs and cats. Aren't you going to put me back in the orphanage? I don't want to go there." Betty held her little girl close to her. "I promise I won't. Come on, don't be afraid. We won't hurt you." Tatiana called at work and asked to be excused, and she and Maidie drove home. On the way, the woman stopped at a children's world and bought the children's world, and bought the child new, beautiful things, toys and sweets. Maddie was taken aback by the huge, luxurious mansion. First thing Betty did was draw a bath full of fragrant foam and bathe the scruffy little girl. It wasn't until now, brushing and braiding her clean, curly blonde hair, that Betty suddenly realized how much Maidie resembled her sister Victoria. The same brow span, dimpled cheeks, and green eyes. The thought flashed through her head. What if it's Victoria's baby? Was her sister such a trash that she abandoned her own daughter in an orphanage? How is that possible? We've got to find out. Betty fed the poor girl a delicious lunch, and the skeebs, beaten girl, immediately fell asleep, sweetly, curled up on the soft couch. Now she was hugging a new doll, a beautiful Barbie, and Betty took Kira in her arms. The doll even winked at her with its dirty, time-worn eye. Her dress was all frayed and faded and stained, and her hair was tangled and turned gray from dust instead of blonde, as if it were gray. Still, it was the closest thing Betty had to a toy. Tears streamed from her eyes, and she whispered to the doll, "Hello, my little friend. You still found the owner. I'm very glad." In the evening, Wayne arrived from work and was stunned to see an adorable little girl playing on the carpet in the bedroom. She raised her head at him with childlike directness, not the least bit embarrassed, and said with a smile, "Hello. Is your name Uncle Wayne? Aunt Beatty told me all about you. That you're the best and kindest. I'm Maddie. I'll be staying with you for a while. You won't turn me away, will you?" Wayne laughed, didn't know what to answer, and turned the conversation to another topic, helping the little girl assemble the soft big puzzles. Betty whispered to him, "I'll explain everything to you later when the baby goes to sleep. Okay. You're not offended that I didn't warn you. It's just that everything happened so suddenly. I'm still in shock myself." Then the three of them ate dinner, watched a children's movie, all played together with Cocky the dog, and read the little girl a fairy tale about a princess. The happy little girl, stunned by so many gifts and attention to herself, barely fell asleep, and Betty and Wayne went into the kitchen to talk. His wife emotionally told him about everything, cradling that very Kira doll. She pleaded, "There she is, my Kira, the same doll from my childhood. It's definitely her. I know it. Where did Maddie get it? She said she'd been dropped off at the orphanage with that doll. The only person who could have had it was my sister Victoria. So that makes Maddie her daughter and my own niece. Do you understand?" I'm shocked. It's fantastic to meet your own niece in the street like this. It's unbelievable. But on the other hand, Maidie's mother's doll could have been given to her by someone else. How am I supposed to find out? Help me, Wayne, please. Let's not give Sashenka to an orphanage just yet. Do you want me to get down on my knees? I feel in my heart that she's no stranger to me. I've been fond of her since the first time I saw her. Even if it turns out she's not my niece, can we adopt her? I've wanted to be a mom for so long, and now fate has sent us this little girl. Wayne put his arms around Betty and held her close to him. Sweetheart, I beg you, calm down. What am I? A barbarian in your opinion, or a chump without a soul? I am also very sympathetic to the little girl. It feels like she has always lived with us. I really enjoyed tonight. You're right, with a baby the family is complete. Let's do this. First, we'll do a genetic test and find out for sure if it's your sister's daughter or not. And then we'll go to the orphanage. I'll hire the best lawyer, and he'll help us find out everything about Maidie's parents and get the adoption process started. He'll also make sure she stays with us officially. In the meantime, you take a month off. I'll sign off and devote yourself to the baby. I can see the light in your eyes, and I want you to be the happiest you can be. Betty hugged her husband tightly and, sobbing, began to kiss him frantically. You are the best husband in the world and the most worthy man. I love you so much and am eternally grateful that you understand me. Feel my soul. Thank you, Wayne, dear. Betty's genetic test results were both heartwarming and overwhelming. Maddie was indeed her niece, a little kinswoman. But then, where is Victoria? What had happened to her? What had happened to her? Why did she decide to give her own blood to an orphanage? Maybe she was in trouble and needed help. Betty scolded herself at the last words. What kind of sister am I? Even though Victoria wasn't perfect, hurting her, not calling her. What about me? Am I any better? I'm stuck on my childhood grievances. Couldn't you have found out for yourself how your own family was doing, at least once in a while? Ask how her life is going. What a touchy princess. She and Wayne learned at the orphanage that nothing was known of Maddie's mother's fate, who she was or what happened to her. The girl had simply been dropped off at the gate of the orphanage at the age of 2 at night. All she had with her was this doll and a note. The child's name is Maddie, and she is 2 years old. I'm a bad mother. I don't know who her father is. She'll be better off here. Betty was desperate, so where could she find Victoria? It was a dead end. Her late mother didn't even know much about Victoria when she was alive. She'd wandered through towns and cities, changing roommates. Betty had called all Victoria's former friends and acquaintances, but no one knew anything about her sister's fate. But Wayne hired a private detective, and he was shredded to find her trail. It turns out that Victoria all these years led an extremely dissipated and immoral lifestyle, sinking ever lower to the bottom. And for the past 3 months, she had been lying in a hospice for cancer patients. When she got the address, Betty rushed there like a bullet. She prayed the whole way. If only she could make it, let her be alive. To see her, to talk to her, to beg her forgiveness, to look into her own eyes. Hug my little sister, help her. But the head physician was very upset with Betty. Her sister had passed away here a month ago. It was her lifestyle and bad habits that had led her to the terrible diagnosis. Veronica said that Victoria was unable to give them up, even in death, and demanded a single cigarette and a shot of liquor. The chief physician gave Betty her sister's personal belongings and her cross, the same one her father had given her when she was a little girl. It had "Save and Preserve" written on it. Betty couldn't hold back the tears as they rolled down her cheeks. A shriveled old woman in the room also told me that Victoria often thought of her sister and lamented that they didn't speak, regretting that she was a cuckoo for living her life so mediocrely. They also found this shabby notebook under her pillow. The old woman didn't know why she'd pocketed it, just in case. Betty found out where her sister's remains were and decided to give her a proper burial, a proper wake, and then put a monument on her grave. It was not nice to have a family member lying among the nameless and forgotten, with a skewed wooden plaque. At home, when Maddie sat down to paint, Betty opened Victoria's notebook with trembling hands. It was a sort of mini-diary where her sister wrote down some of her thoughts and feelings. Betty read feverishly, "I hate myself. I'm a good-for-nothing wench, not a mother. How's my Maddie? Why did I do it? I thought it would at least work out. He promised me if I got rid of someone else's baby, he'd marry me. But he turned out to be just another jerk. He dumped me and found himself a younger girl. So I'm left with a broken home." Betty was in shock. 6 months ago, another entry. "God, my stomach hurts so bad it burns like fire. When am I going to get out of here? It's payback for leaving my daughter. I'm lying in this rotten room, abandoned and unwanted. How's Maddie? She probably hates me. What have I done? I hated my sister for nothing as a child. I listened to my mother. I thought it was better to find a richer groom, and that's happiness." How many times she invited Betty to visit, but I wouldn't go. And when she was bad, instead of coming to support her, I stole her favorite doll to hurt her. I always envied her. She's smart, not like me. Betty will never forgive me, that's for sure. Neither will my daughter. I wasted my life on men's bunks. I drank my health. I didn't appreciate my loved ones. I'm stupid. Not even tears. I just don't want to live. Open my eyes and see that old woman in the room. Betty sobbed and reread the diary over and over again, realizing that she too was wrong in many ways. He should have taken an interest in her sister's life, not let her disappear, at least try to pull her out of the abyss of her binge life. And she did what? She didn't even know Victoria had a daughter. So much for native blood. A frightened Maidie ran to Betty and asked, "Why are you crying? Did someone hurt you? I'm scared." The girl hugged the baby, cradled her in her arms. "Don't be afraid, kitten. Just today I learned a lot of important news, good and bad. It turns out that your mother, Victoria, is my own sister. And you are not a stranger to me at all, but my own niece. That's it. I thought I could talk to your mom, but I found out she's dead, and that makes me very bitter and sad. That's why I'm crying. It turns out, Maidie, your mom isn't a bad person at all. She was just sick for a long time and had to put you in an orphanage. So you forgive her and don't hold a grudge, okay?" Betty opened her palm and showed the girl Victoria's cross. "It's your mother's cross. The memory of her. Let me put it on for you. Wear it all your life and let it remind you of her. Okay?" The girl nodded and hugged Betty even tighter. "Now you're going to be my mother, aren't you? You won't take me back to the orphanage, will you? You won't leave me? I'll be a good girl, honestly. Just don't leave me, please." Betty couldn't hold back any longer. Tears streamed from her eyes. She whispered, "Darling Maddie, I will not give you to anyone now, you understand? No one in the world. Don't even think such thoughts out of your head. Wayne and I are your parents now. But don't forget Mommy. I'll show you her picture. We'll go to her grave. I'll show you her picture. We'll go to her grave. Now let's wipe our nose. Daddy will be here soon. And you and I don't have dinner ready." And they got down to business, baking cabbage pie and frying chops. Wayne was licking his eyes from the doorway, smelling of something amazing. Maidie was the first one to rush out into the hallway, and she jumped at the man's neck. "Yay, Daddy's home. Daddy's home. And we made all these delicacies with Mommy. You are going to love it. I helped." That word, Daddy, made Wayne feel so warm, and he began kissing the little cheeks and whispering, "Hello, my little girl. What a good girl. I'll be sure to try everything." Betty came out next and pressed softly against her husband. "Hi, my love. How are you? Are you very tired? I missed you so much. Wash your hands and come to the table. We're all ready." Wayne kissed his wife tenderly and thought to himself, what happiness it is to have a family, to be waited on, loved, cared for, and missed. It's amazing how this baby girl has brought them even more together, made the family complete and strong. Betty tracked down Victoria's grave. It was horrible. Her sister rested among unknown vagrants and the homeless. Only a wooden plaque with her name and date of birth and death. The woman fell straight to the damp ground and began to sob. "Victoria, my darling, my little sister, forgive me for everything. Because of my stupid, childish pride and resentment, completely abandoned you. Life has scattered us across the cities, and our ties of kinship have been broken. It shouldn't be like this. Why did you leave so early? How could it be? It's unfair and horrible. Don't you worry, Maidie found me. I believe it was Kira's doll that brought her to me. Oh, she has been my mascot since childhood. Thank you for leaving it with Maddie. It was seeing it in a strange little girl's hands that made my heart skip a beat. Maddie is now my daughter. Wayne and I love her dearly. Take care of her and never hurt her. Raise her with dignity. May you rest in peace, and I will take care of my daughter. It is my sisterly duty." Betty ordered a prayer service, held a memorial service, and erected a good-looking monument on her sister's grave. She and Maidie would come here and sit on the bench, and Betty would tell the girl how wonderful her mother had been. So the child wouldn't be bitter that her own mother had abandoned her because she had been a good for nothing girl. 6 months later, Maddie was adopted officially, and Wayne gave her his last name. The girl turned out to be bright and talented. She went to first grade, did well, and it was there that her singing teacher advised Betty to send her to music school. He was the first to see her potential. Maidie really did sing beautifully and had an excellent ear. She got that from Victoria. She'd loved to sing as a child, too, but their mother hadn't had time to take care of the children. At last, Betty was completely happy to be a mother. She got up at 5 in the morning to do everything, woke up her little girl, braided her pigtails, fed her breakfast, took her to school, did homework with her, listened to all the children's joys and sorrows, and got such a high from it. She saw that Wayne, too, truly loved Sashenka, protected her, proudly told everyone, "This is my daughter Marie, an old doll." Kira held a place of honor in the Wayne family. Restored and smiling, she sat on the dresser in the hallway and greeted the household. Betty truly believed that it was her late daddy's gift that got her out of all the trouble. And she considered Kira not only hers, but her daughter's amulet as well. And another year later, their family was bigger. Betty finally became pregnant and gave birth to a wonderful baby boy. He was named Tom. Since it was truly a gift from God, it was the kind of happiness Betty had never hoped for. Wayne shone like a polished samovar as he was handed a blue envelope containing his son on the doorstep. And Maidie gibbered, "Hello, little brother." Oh, how funny. Wrinkled like an old grandfather. Now you can really play at being a mother's daughter, not for fun. "Mama, will you let me take him in the baby carriage?" Betty hugged her daughter. "Of course I will. We will do everything together and bathe and walk with Tomchik. There's one thing I want you to do, my darling. Whatever happens in your life, always be together with your brother. Take care of each other and love, and do not repeat my mistakes. Okay, the wrongs will pass and be forgotten, but it will be hard to get the man back." And then he took his wife's hand and added, "Mama's right. She's so wise. Well, family, shall we go home and celebrate the birth of a son? I bought a huge cake and a pizza. Who's with me?" Everyone laughed merrily and got in the car. On the way, Maddie looked into the envelope and hummed to the baby and carefully adjusted the bedspread. And Betty and Wayne were perfectly happy. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.